وسهلا بكل الذين ينضموا للاستماع إلى راديو بلدي أول راديو عربي أمريكي ويعنى بقضايا العرب في المهجر. برامجنا في راديو بلدي كل يوم جمعة من 8 وحتى 9 صباحا في بث حي ومباشر عبر WNZK راديو 690 AM. صباح الخير بلدي، صباح الخير لكل مستمعينا.
Welcome to Radio Baladi, the first Arab, Middle Eastern, and American simulcast radio show. Radio Baladi is broadcast every Friday morning on WNZK 690 AM from 8 till 9 Eastern Time on Good Morning Michigan. Our call-in number 248-557-3300. And now, stay tuned for the best radio talk show on Arab and American issues.
I am Atef Abdel Gawad. Join me the first Friday of each month at 8 a.m. Eastern Time. I will be discussing some of the most important issues and events in the Middle East live on America's Voice of the Arabs. WNZK 690 AM and WDMV 700 AM.
Good day, everyone. Bibi Netanyahu is back. He's back for the 6th time as Prime Minister of Israel. But this time, he has a coalition partners who belong to the extreme far right. One of them had been convicted of racism, and Mr. Netanyahu himself still faces corruption charges. The policies and actions of the new government will impact 4 areas: the future of liberal democracy in the country, the future of the independent judiciary in Israel, relations with the Palestinians and Muslims in general, and the relationship with the White House and President Biden. President Biden has asserted the U.S. will continue to support the two-state solution. To discuss those areas of impact and intention, we have a group of distinguished guests and experts. Professor Brad Roth, who is Professor of Political Science and Law at Wayne State University, Mr. Said Arikat, who is a long-time Washington-based Palestinian journalist, and Mr. Edward Ahmed Mitchell, the Deputy Director of the Council on American-Islamic Relations, CARE. Before we start our conversation, I would like just to point out that we are coming to you not just on radio, but also on Facebook. Go to Facebook, go to US Arab Radio, the page of US Arab Radio, and you will see us on video via the Zoom application. So if you want to see us in action and for real, just go and follow us on Facebook as well as listening to us on the radio. Now, my first question, I don't know if we have all the guests ready, but I would like to have all 3 guests answer my first question. And we'll start with Professor Roth. What is the potentially more serious tension that may arise between Israel and the White House under the new government, of course?
Well, there are various provocations that are being engaged in already by particular members of Netanyahu's government. Netanyahu, in order to be able to have a coalition that has the potential to keep him out of prison, basically to be able to manipulate the legal system, in order to have people he will sit with in a cabinet, he's had to rely on extreme figures who in the past have tended to be marginalized in Israeli politics. Itamar Ben-Gvir is the new national security minister. We saw he had a quickie trip to the Temple Mount for just 13 minutes. This was one of the ways in which there were efforts on his part to trigger crises and embarrassing situations. Netanyahu really has kind of a viper in his own midst in that respect, because lots of things that Netanyahu would like to keep calm, Ben-Gvir would not like to keep calm. Ben-Gvir is also interested in changing the conditions of Palestinian security prisoners, of whom there are 4,000 or 5,000, and therefore creating conditions where there are likely to be prison riots and other kinds of very serious issues arising that the Biden administration would like not to see. It's also important to note that there's the problems of continuity are as bad as the problems of change. That this last year was the bloodiest year in terms of deaths of Palestinians in the territories at the hands of Israeli security forces since 2004. 144 Palestinians were killed. And so these kinds of developments are likely to continue. It's going to be harder and harder for the Biden administration to try to keep these issues submerged, whereas the Biden administration, I think, would very much like to avoid confrontation. But another problem, of course, is that new ambiguities on the question of Russia have arisen, and this is going to irritate many parts of the administration and President Biden's own constituents, because of the tendency of Netanyahu to want to play both sides, and his foreign minister has already indicated a backing away from rhetorical support, at least for Ukraine on the part of Israel. So it's going to be a complicated relationship.
We'll discuss in details some elements of your answer in a minute, but let me, I don't see Mr. Arikat with us, but let me.
I am on.
You are here. Great.
I'm
great.
here, but
Mr. Arikat, the same question. What is the most serious tension that may arise between Mr. Biden and Mr. Netanyahu?
I think there is some tension. There's always been some sort of tension between Netanyahu and Biden in the past. We know that when Biden was vice president, for instance, tension arose at the time over the Iran nuclear deal and so on. So there's always been that thing. But, you know, Mr. Biden claimed to be a close friend to Netanyahu and vice versa. I don't believe that tension as a result of the Ben-Gvir visit or the makeup of the Israeli government is going to really amount to much. You know, there will be, you know, they're annoyed for sure. They would have loved to see Lapid, for instance, win the elections, and they worked very hard to do that. But they failed at that. But, you know, nonetheless, the United States is committed to supporting Israel no matter what it does, whether diplomatically, militarily, and economically, and in the UN, as we see day after day. So I am not so sure that beyond some strong messages from time to time. I mean, I go to the State Department every day. I attend the briefing, and I pose these questions, and unfortunately, they never really materialize because, let's face it, I mean, it's the United States is completely committed to supporting a continuation of the Israeli occupation. They have not done anything to stop that. They probably, of any country on earth, the United States holds a great deal of leverage if they wanted to end that. But, you know, I mean, they seem to go along time after time. We have seen this in trying to generate even more support for Israel and its policies by enthusiastically or actively pushing for normalization between the Arab countries and Israel. Only yesterday, the spokesman said that they are committed to increased normalization. They will attend the conference next March or whenever it happens, you know, the normalization conference. in Morocco. So we have not seen anything. There are no indications beyond some statements that, such as maintaining the status quo on Al-Haram Sharif and Al-Aqsa Mosque. Really, we have not seen anything beyond that. Even going back 22 years, when Sharon stormed Al-Aqsa in September 2000, the United States boycotted him. They didn't speak with him for 18 years. Then he came back and was rehabilitated, became prime minister, and was greeted and received and treated as a great man. Bush called him a man of peace and all that stuff. That was after the Sabra and Meshtila massacre, the boycott of Sharon. So this time around, this is not likely to happen.
Mr. Mitchell, are you with us?
I am. Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, great. Yes, now I can see you.
Yes.
Great. So the same question. What is the most serious tension that may arise between Israel, the new government in Israel, and the White House?
Sure. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. So interestingly, I don't think it's related to Palestine. I think the greatest potential tension relates to Iran. Prime Minister Netanyahu has for over 20 years been claiming that Iran is a few months away from a nuclear weapon, and has made no secret of the fact that he would prefer a military action to resolve that conflict rather than diplomacy. And I suspect he knows that there's no better way to stay in office than to start a military conflict to whip up even more support. So I think the greatest potential tension would be if the Iran nuclear deal were to return, that I think would cause a huge conflict, or if it doesn't come back and Prime Minister Netanyahu decides that he wants to launch some sort of military attack on Iran to stop them from advancing their civilian nuclear program, I think that would be a huge source of tension, because the Biden administration does not, I think, want to get involved in another war in the Middle East. Now, as for Palestine, as Mr. Arikat said, I really don't expect a lot of tension there. Yes, maybe some pointed statements criticizing things the Israeli government does, but President Biden made it very clear when he was on the campaign trail, he absolutely opposes conditioning any aid to the Israeli government, no matter what they do. He's not going to boycott the prime minister, even though Benjamin Netanyahu is a racist and a war criminal. He called him his friend and welcomed his re-election public statement. So I really don't expect anything to change much from the United States in terms of policy. From our perspective, when President Biden took office, it became very clear to us the path he was going to take. When that first attack was launched on Gaza by then Prime Minister Netanyahu, he killed numerous Palestinian civilians, including children. They blew up a building that housed the Associated Press in Gaza. And that did not spark any real change in U.S. policy towards the Israeli government's human rights abuses. And then we all know Shireen Abu Akleh was murdered by an Israeli sniper. It was very clear that she was murdered deliberately by an Israeli sniper, and barely anything has been done. Only recently did the FBI finally say they would investigate the matter, and the Israeli government said, we're not going to let you, and nothing has happened. So, if you can shoot an American journalist in the head and get away with it, if you can blow up a building that housed the Associated Press and get away with it, I just think it's very hard to imagine what the Israeli government would have to do for there to be a real break between the Biden administration and Israel, even under someone as difficult as Netanyahu.
When we come back after a brief break, it seems to me that the three of you agree that Mr. Biden or the U.S. Will not be doing anything about the violations, new violations by the new Israeli government. My question for the three of you after we come back from the break is this. Mr. Biden says he supports the two-state solution, but he hasn't even opened a U.S. consulate in East Jerusalem. So what is the initial concrete step that Mr. Biden should take to translate his support into action when we come back?
ArabNews.com, bringing you breaking news from across the Middle East and the latest on Arabs in America. Get inside the latest headlines with expert analysis and insights at ArabNews.com. Join over 5 million Facebook fans and over 10 million monthly readers. ArabNews.com. News that matters to you. Life is a nonprofit charity that's provided humanitarian aid and development to people and communities for over 25 years, regardless of race, color, religion, or cultural background. When disaster occurs here or around the world, Life for Relief and Development rushes in to provide food, medical aid, and shelter to those in need. Please help improve these efforts. Make your tax-deductible donation to Life now at lifeusa.org or call 248-424-7493.
Are your hands feeling numb? Do you feel pain opening up a jar, turning a key? Are you noticing that your elbow and your shoulder are becoming stiff? Or were you recently injured in your arm? Hello, I'm Dr. Abdul Katranji, and at the Katranji Hand Center, which just recently opened down the street from the Somerset Mall, we can provide you with the latest in hand, wrist, elbow, and shoulder care. Visit us at www.katranjihandcenter.com to learn the latest techniques that we have to offer you, and I look forward to taking care of you.
Visit us in Troy at 1565 West Big Beaver Road, Building F, or call Katranji Hand Center for an appointment at 248-869-4263. That's 248-869-4263.
Ziyad brand. Quality products from our family to yours. Ziyad Brothers Importing offers the finest quality products, including brands like Sultan, Kraft, Nestle, Hook, Rico Picon, Donna, and many more. Ask your retailer to carry these fine products because you deserve the very best. For more information, visit our website at www.ziyad.com. That's www.ziyad.com. Ziyad, quality products from our family to yours.
I am Atef Abdel Gawad. Join me the first Friday of each month at 8 a.m. Eastern Time. I will be discussing some of the most important issues and events in the Middle East live on America's Voice of the Arabs. WNZK 690 AM and WDMV 700 AM.
Welcome back to our conversation on Radio Baladi. We are discussing the policies and actions, potential policies and actions by the new far right-wing Israeli cabinet and how that might impact the U.S.-Israeli relationship. And I would like to remind our audience that we are coming to you not just on radio, but also on by video. If you go to Facebook, the page of U.S. Arab Radio, you can watch us on Zoom. Now, my question is for the three of my guests, distinguished guests, and let's start with Mr. Arikat this time. As I said before the break, Mr. Biden says he supports the two-state solution, but he has not even opened a U.S. consulate in East Jerusalem, as he had repeatedly promised. What is the initial concrete step that Mr. Biden should take to translate his support into action? Mr. Arikat.
Well, first, let's look at the statement itself. I think the United States government or this administration, as in previous administration, has used the mantra, and that's what it is, two-state solution, as really no more than that, something to deflect other issues and responsibilities and so on, because it comes, with a whole set of words and that are intended to really deflect serious probing of the issue. They say, don't change the status quo, any unilateral movements and so on that could jeopardize the two-state solution should be refrained from. Well, we see day after day that the Israeli occupation does that without any sort of reference to the American position, or without any difference to the U.S. position. So I don't believe that this statement has much value now. I mean, I do appreciate the position of the United States and that it can, in fact, sort of weigh in on this issue and make it happen. But for now, at least we have not seen any signs of that. But to answer your question, what could they do? Yes, they can do. I mean, Israel, the United States is the benefactor of Israel. They supply them with $4 billion worth of arms a year. They supply them with support, political and diplomatic support and economic support all throughout the world. And it empowers the Israeli occupation in different ways. So they can say, look, well, for instance, we take Jerusalem. When you talk about Jerusalem, say, all right, they moved the embassy to Jerusalem from Tel Aviv. They recognize Jerusalem as capital to the state, capital of the state of Israel. They could very simply say tomorrow, all right, we recognize West Jerusalem. Now we recognize East Jerusalem as the capital of the Palestinian state. They can recognize the Palestinian Authority as a Palestinian state instead of opposing it time and time again. They are not only do they oppose recognizing Palestine as a state and the UN, but they also, they invoke the veto, for instance, when this issue comes up in the United Nations. They oppose Palestinian participation in any of the UN agencies. So there are some really rudimentary steps or basic steps that the administration can take to show that it is really committed to the two-state solution without sort of jumping the gun, maintaining what they say, that this ought to be arrived at through negotiation, that there are some final status issues that you need to get to before you do this and so on. But definitely there are steps, especially in Jerusalem. And you mentioned the consulate. I don't believe the consulate will ever open. I don't believe it will ever open. I think what they have done last month, which is the elevation of the position of Hadi Amra as an envoy to the Palestinian, is really a substitute to the consulate. Now, they tell you the consulate staff still operate from the same building. They report directly to the State Department and all this. And this may be, well and good and all that stuff, but they will not be open. The consulate as a symbol that they are really committed to Palestinian independence and so on. They will not reopen the office in Washington. I mean, these are steps that the former administration took, and Mr. Biden has promised that he will do as early as possible in his administration, and we have not seen that. So there are absolutely no indication that this administration will do anything, to give some weight or stock into its statement about a two-state solution.
Mr. Mitchell.
Thank you. Look, I think that the two-state solution at this point seems to many people, like a fantasy. There was a time when even Netanyahu gave vague lip service to accepting it, but even he has given up on that. The Israeli government's new policies very explicitly state that they believe that Jewish people and Jewish people alone have an exclusive right to the entirety of the land, including land that is right now Palestinian land. And so there's no way you can have a two-state solution with that policy in existence. And again, the United States has not condemned that or taken any steps to make a two-state solution a reality. And so, if he wanted to take some steps to preserve that as an option, that is President Biden, I think Mr. Arikat laid out some very good ideas that I think will never happen anytime soon because of politics in the United States. But number one, you could condition aid to the Israeli government on them ending their human rights violations against Palestinians and taking concrete steps to end the occupation. You could recognize, as he suggested, East Jerusalem as the capital of a Palestinian state. You could reopen the Palestine Affairs Office in D.C. You could stop blocking UN resolutions at the Security Council that would recognize and support Palestinian freedom. And of course, you could simply recognize the state of Palestine as dozens and dozens and dozens of countries around the world have done. Do I expect President Biden to do that, or any politician who might be elected president in the coming years to do that? No. And so I think the only thing that could really change this is if Prime Minister Netanyahu and his government, they take extreme steps that really erase the thin veneer, the thin fantasy of that two-state solution. That could force the United States to at least say something, beyond what they would normally say to try to preserve this two-state solution. And I think that's the one thing that could come of this new government. They're so extreme. They are done pretending they support peace. They might do something or say something so far out there that it really gives the Biden administration no choice but to say something further than what they would normally do. But again, saying something is not action. I just find it so hard to imagine this administration in particular taking any concrete action that would preserve the option of a two-state solution. But those are some of the things they could do if they wanted to.
Professor Roth.
I agree with all that's been said. I think that part of the problem is the basic framework to start with, the idea of the two-state solution. This is a promissory note that no one intends to honor. President Biden himself made some statement to the effect of not in the near term. Well, it was never going to be in the near term. It really sort of makes fools of us who have actually worked for the two-state solution going back 40 years. This was back 40 years ago when this was an issue that really, represented the pathway to actually having mutual self-determination, to have genuine negotiations between equal partners, to find a way to turn partition into a vehicle that could actually realize Palestinian self-determination on equal terms. That has very quickly been betrayed. This pointed out that Netanyahu himself at times has invoked the two-state solution. That just shows how moribund the idea actually has become, because it now becomes the alibi. It's a way of not accepting the reality of apartheid, that what's occurred in the occupied territories is not exceptional to the Israeli state. It is part and parcel of the reality of the Israeli state. And therefore, what needs to be focused on is the deprivation of self-determination, not for particular categories of Palestinians, but for the whole of the Palestinian people that has been fragmented artificially into these different categories of residents of the Gaza Strip, residents of the West Bank, residents of East Jerusalem, Arab citizens of Israel, and the Palestinian diaspora. By continuing to focus on the two-state solution in the way that it's been framed, it's been possible to simply avoid the fundamental question of Palestinian equality and Palestinian self-determination.
Yeah, Professor Roth, you, in your first answer, you talked about how Russia and the relationship between Mr. Netanyahu and Russia could be a potential source of tension with Washington, and how Mr. Netanyahu may be playing both sides against each other. Can you expand on this?
Well, there is a peculiar situation here where the Netanyahu administration is on the one hand trying to maintain relationship with Putin, at the same time as not seeking to alienate Western partners. I think that this is sort of part and parcel of the peculiar dances that Netanyahu has been undertaking to stay in power. There is a kind of core of his constituency that is fundamentally illiberal, and that the significance of the ambiguities on the Russia question really is sort of to disclose the extent to which the underlying values that animate Israeli policies are not the values that are typically articulated in the West in the name of perpetuating the policies in the Middle East. This idea of Israel as the lone democracy in the Middle East, standing with the West, is very much undermined by the kinds of ambiguities of Netanyahu at this point. But I think that this, in the end, is a subordinate point. I think that ultimately the difficulty in the long term for the Israelis will be the way in which support in the United States will erode for Israel as such, precisely because of the sort of revealing of the distance between the actual kinds of mentalities applied to policies toward the Palestinians that exists in Israel versus what's superimposed upon Israel by those in the West who are sympathetic to it. And those contradictions become more and more apparent when you have people like Ben-Gvir and Smotrich, and also the ultra-Orthodox parties who have their own agenda imposing themselves upon Netanyahu, who really doesn't care about those issues, but needs to appease the only people who are willing to keep him in power. And so that sort of ideological distance, I think, is ultimately corrosive to Israel's position. But it's a long-term process. It's not something that's going to give rise to policy change in the United States overnight.
We'll take a break in a second, but when we come back from the break, I will ask Mr. Arikat, how will the Palestinians deal with the new Israeli government after the break?
At Top Rehab Physical Therapy Clinic in Dearborn, we provide effective physical therapy sessions in order to limit pain and discomfort. Top Rehab provides physical therapy care for any diagnosis prescribed by a physician, and we regularly see and treat conditions such as stroke, TMJ, fibromyalgia, sciatica, joint pain, and more. We use a variety of pain management methods, including modalities, soft tissue mobilization, and therapeutic exercise. If you're in need of physical rehabilitation or physical therapy, get the highest quality health care at Top Rehab. Most insurance is accepted, and we're open Monday, Wednesday, and Friday 8 to 6, Tuesday and Thursday 8 to 5, and Saturday 10 till 2. Call for an appointment today at 313-846-0555. That's 313-846-0555. Choose Top Rehab Physical Therapy Clinic on Michigan Avenue in Dearborn. Life's too short to be in pain. Get ready for an amazing experience at Ishtar Restaurant on 15 Mile Road in Sterling Heights. Enjoy excellent hospitality from owners Ali Al-Baghdadi and Fatty Bottom, serving the best in Mediterranean food. Try Chef Ali Al-Baghdadi's famous shawarma, the best Iraqi grills and food, and the best Arabic and international dishes. Dine in our authentic atmosphere or take out. Call 586-698-2585 or check us out on Facebook. Ishtar Restaurant practices all CDC guidelines and is open every day, 11 a.m. to 10 p.m. Have an amazing experience today at Ishtar Restaurant, 3625 15 Mile Road, Sterling Heights.
Are you going to start a restaurant or a grocery store soon? Do you need floor plans and designs? Call Naji Abood at 734-744-9796. Do you want to buy kitchen and restaurant equipment at discount prices? Call Naji Abood now, 734-744-9796. New Concept Products and Design, the trademark of kitchen equipment. 5% discount on all purchases of $75,000 or more. New Concept Products and Design, new location, 31185 Schoolcraft in Livonia. Learn more at www.newconceptproducts.com. Call Naji Abood, 734-744-9796.
Our noses can sniff out all kinds of things. Good things and bad things. Your nose knows if those sniffles are just a cold, allergies, or COVID-19. So if you want to be sure, swab and test your nose for answers. It's good to know. Find testing information and resources at michigan.gov/COVID test. A message from the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services.
I am Atef Abdel Gawad. Join me the first Friday of each month at 8 a.m. Eastern Time. I will be discussing some of the most important issues and events in the Middle East live on America's Voice of the Arabs. WNZK 690 AM and WDMV 700 AM.
Welcome back to our conversation on Radio Baladi. We are discussing the new Israeli government and how its actions and policies may impact several things, including the relationship with the White House. And my next question goes to Mr. Arikat. How will the Palestinians deal with the new government?
Very good question. I think the Palestinians, or let's say official Palestinians, the PA, the Palestinian Authority, who is really a spent force in many ways. They have not been very effective on the international stage. They have not been very effective in terms of dealing with the Israeli occupation and policies, and more they are becoming marginalized because of, not only because of international treatment and Israel constantly saying that the issue and the problem is elsewhere. It's not with the Palestinians. You know, it's with Iran, it's with normalization, it's with Syria, but not with what's going on with the Palestinians. So I think that the Palestinian Authority will continue its course. I mean, you know, like we've seen yesterday, going to the United Nations, working with their representative at the UN and the Security Council, and raise issues from time to time and gather that kind of international support, work with other organizations, pursue more recognitions and so on, but not much more because it is there's so much that it can do. I mean, it is an entity that is steeped in corruption and lack of resources. It has ever since signed on to Oslo become in one way or another, some sort of the subcontractor, as the Palestinians like to say, of the Israeli occupation. On the other hand, I think we will see a rise of Palestinian activism in many ways, and I'm afraid that brings a lot of violence with it. You know, we have seen back in 2000, for instance, after Sharon's visit, we had the Intifada that went on for at least 3-4 years, and it was very, very bloody, one of the bloodiest times. As was mentioned by Brad early on in this conversation, that the last year was the bloodiest year for the Palestinians, you know, and the new year promises to be just as bloody. You know, so far, 5 days, 5 Palestinians killed, and so on. The Israeli occupation continues, very faithfully in conducting its policies that have not really changed much over the past 40 or 50 years and so on. I don't know how long. But for sure, the Palestinians are fed up with the occupation. They will continue to wage their own struggle, almost independent of the of any Palestinian leadership. We will see also, violence rising in the West Bank, but also in Gaza and in East Jerusalem. You know, we saw this in 2021 with Sheikh Jarrah. We'll see it again and again. So there will be more, an uptick, let's say, in resistance and violence.
Mr. Mitchell, even before the current right-wing government, Mr. Netanyahu had plans to annex great portions of the West Bank. Those plans were put on hold as a condition for the UAE normalizing with Israel. What might happen now this time around?
I think Prime Minister Netanyahu in their statements have implied that that is still their goal, but they want to consider the timing and Israel's interests before doing that. And I think that's a subtle way of saying we're going to wait for a different president to be in office before they do it. If you see a Ron DeSantis elected in 2024 or any sort of change there, I think they'd feel a much freer hand to annex parts of or all of Palestinian land and also to take military action against Iran. The one complication of that would be these burgeoning relationships with Arab governments in the region. The UAE is obviously at this point, many Palestinians would say, not a support for their cause of freedom, and other governments the same. But would the UAE put up with the annexation of Palestinian land? Would they put up with officially incorporating Al-Aqsa Masjid into Israel? That I think would be a huge pill even for them to swallow. So I think that's the one thing that might stop the Israeli government from out and out annexing all of that land, is these relationships with Arab governments who I think are still terrified of their people, know their people don't support the so-called and insultingly named Abraham Accords, may peace be upon Abraham, who would never countenance any of these human rights violations. And so I think that's the one thing that could hold them back, is that the Arab street, the people of the Arab world do not support this. The governments know that. And I think the governments can only get away with suppressing their people's voices for so long. And I think the Israeli government doing something very extreme could finally cause the people of the Muslim and Arab world to speak up and rise up in a way that their governments would not tolerate. So that's my read on that, and God knows best what's going to happen in the coming months and years.
Professor Roth, how would the new government weaken the traditional liberal democracy in Israel?
Well, in a great number of ways. First of all, the government is very much hostage to ultra-Orthodox parties that have a major share of power. And those parties are concerned to do a number of things that erode rights of women, erode rights of LGBTQ people, and also actually try to limit the conception of who counts as a Jew for purposes of immigration. So there are all sorts of ways in which you have this sort of body, this sort of part of the coalition causing difficulty. But there's further the question of trying to overcome the independence of judicial institutions. Because of course, Netanyahu is on trial, but also the leader of one of the ultra-Orthodox parties, Aryeh Deri, has serious criminal issues, and so the goal to undermine the independent attorney general is one of the main focuses of this administration. Further, there is in the works the potential for passage through the Knesset of a bill that would allow for overrides of the Israeli High Court. That we have in Israel a peculiar form of judicial review of legislation, notwithstanding the overall principle of parliamentary supremacy. So Parliament has the capacity to deprive the Supreme Court in Israel of the ability to strike down legislation. It can incorporate what's referred to in Canada as a notwithstanding clause, a possibility for a legislative majority to actually pass legislation that has been condemned as unconstitutional. And that isn't always a bad thing in a parliamentary democracy, but the problem in Israel specifically is that policy is held hostage to special interest groups that are deeply hostile to civil liberties, and particularly on religious questions. And that this is going to create, I think, a very serious crisis if that bill goes forward, as it may later in the year. And so we're going to see an undermining of the independence of the judiciary, an undermining of the independence of the attorney general, opening the door to more and more abuses, not only against Palestinians and not only against the Arab minority, but also against many parts of the Jewish community who are not respected fully by members of the governing coalition.
Mr. Arikat, what is the message for us, for the international community, when we see a member of the cabinet in Israel having been convicted of racism while the prime minister himself is facing corruption charges. Are we in a new era in which criminality is becoming the norm?
Well, it shows, for one thing, that the exceptionalism with which Israel is being treated, especially by the United States and the West. Israel has always been treated differently than any other power on earth. They are, the kind of latitude they are allowed by the West is unheard of with any other power. They can go in and destroy villages, imprison people in mass, kill people, children, and so on, keep their bodies. I mean, I have a young cousin who was killed on June 20th, 2020, and they still have his body. I mean, he was just going to pick up his mother, for crying out loud, from a hair salon. So, I mean, these are the kind of things that Israel does, with impunity. So that will continue. Unfortunately, I mean, to look at all this that has been said by both Edward and Brad, and about the nature of the Israeli society and the nature of the Israeli government, the truth is that the Israeli society has, moving more and more towards the right. We've seen it in the election. We've seen it in action. We see it in action. We have not seen, let's say, any major effort by Israelis in Tel Aviv to say this cannot stand or should not stand. The treatment of the Palestinians could not go on. That kind of thing. We have not seen a movement. I am the Vietnam generation, as we saw in this country during the Vietnam era. So I'm afraid that Israel will continue to move rightward. It will continue to consolidate its appetite, and there is no other word for it, because that's really what is going on. And as Edward said early on, the two-state solution is dead. It's dead. I mean, they keep it on a ventilator, on a life support, but it is really dead. So what we need to do, I mean, going to your question, Atef, what needs to be done, what kind of message, is that the Palestinians must reach out to progressive movements throughout the world, to grassroots movements, in the United States and others, to begin to fight for equal rights, because nothing else is going to work. What they should do is really consolidate whatever movement or whatever activism that can be launched and generated anywhere should focus on equal rights for all, because that's the only way, to overcome whatever happens in the Israeli Supreme Court, or the plan that are taking place and so on, not only against the Palestinians or against the Israeli Palestinians and so on, but also against Jews, and Jews not only in Israel, but also in the United States and others and so on. So these should be, the priority point from this point on. I mean, if the PA wants to talk about two-state solution, fine, let them. But I think there ought to be whatever movement there is, and it is happening. It is happening in this country. There has been, a shift, not a shift, some changes within the American Jewish community that you have seen, becoming sort of more vocal and more pronounced in terms of opposing what Israel does, accepting the fact that Israel is really a racist apartheid system and must be fought on these bases, that ultimately the only real solution is to have equal rights. And I think when that movement gains start, we will see a great deal of change.
When we come back from the commercial break, I have a question for Professor Roth. Does Israel still have moderate politicians? Does Israel still have peace-loving politicians? When we come back.
When it comes to reproductive medicine, IVF Michigan fertility centers are the recognized leaders. With locations in Bloomfield Hills and 5 other cities in Michigan and Ohio, IVF has experts in all aspects of the field. As a founding member of IVF Michigan Fertility Centers, Dr. Nicholas Shama is one of the leading reproductive endocrinologists in Michigan and Ohio. Dr. Shama has performed over 10,000 IVF cases and has helped thousands of couples fulfill their dreams of parenthood. American board certified in both obstetrics and gynecology and reproductive endocrinology and infertility, Dr. Nicholas Shama is a very caring, compassionate, expert physician that understands not only the medical but also the emotional toil of infertility on his patients. When it's time, Get personalized care from Dr. Nicholas Shama at IVF Michigan Fertility Centers in Michigan and Ohio. Call toll-free 855-952-9600, 855-952-9600. Enjoy the first Syrian-style cuisine in Michigan. At Damas Cuisine and Catering, you'll find a wide selection of Syrian foods and sweets in our menu, like frikeh, poisi, grape leaves with steak, mashawi platter, hot mahashi, char-grilled kebab, shawarma, and much more. Get super fast delivery from Damas Cuisine and Catering right to your door. Order online at damascuisine.com/menu and track your order live. Damas Cuisine and Catering, 28841 Orchard Lake Road in Farmington Hills. Call 248-987-4985.
When you're looking for the best in optical care, Dr. Ahmed Nakash is your doctor to see. With years of experience and thousands of successful procedures performed, you can trust your eyes to Dr. Ahmed Nakash. See Dr. Ahmed Nakash and his professional staff for your eye care needs. There's 2 locations to serve you. In Hazel Park, call 248-336-3937. 248-336-3937. In Rochester Hills, call 248-299-3937. That's 248-299-3937.
Kashat's Mediterranean Market in Shish Kebab offers a great array of your favorite Mediterranean meals. Meals range from lamb specialties, shawarma sandwiches, and seafood dinners. Plus, they offer big trays of your favorite food and so much more. Kashat's Mediterranean Market in Shish Kebab is located at 32839 Northwestern Highway in Farmington Hills and is open from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. So stop in or call Kashat's today at 248-538-9552. That number again, 248-538-9552. Kashat's Mediterranean Market in Shish Kebab will definitely leave you satisfied.
I am Atef Abdel Gawad. Join me the first Friday of each month at 8 a.m. Eastern Time. I will be discussing some of the most important issues and events in the Middle East live on America's Voice of the Arabs. WNZK 690 AM and WDMV 700 AM.
Welcome back to our conversation on Radio Baladi. We are discussing the new Israeli government and its impact on the relationship with the White House. And my question now goes to Professor Roth. Does Israel still have moderate politicians? What happened to the Labor Party?
Yes, very interesting that the Labor Party, of course, was the founding party of the State of Israel, and more generally, the labor Zionist movement, which represented a kind of merger of, on the one hand, ethno-nationalism, but on the other hand, very much a kind of universalist social democratic project, and the effort to try to combine those two things in terms of this rhetoric of a Jewish and democratic state, as embedded in actually the Israeli Declaration of Independence. All of that really reached a kind of crisis as early as the late 1970s with the coming to power of Likud under Menachem Begin. You had from the late 70s until the end of the 20th century a situation of basically equally divided blocs in Israeli politics between the labor Zionist movement and the revisionist Zionist tendency, which has always been a much more frontally ethno-nationalist, much less universalist understanding of the project of the Israeli state. After the turn of the century, after the collapse of such efforts as there were to reach an accord in 2000-2001 and the beginning of the Al-Aqsa Intifada, you saw really the collapse of labor Zionism and more and more the sense on the part of large parts of the Israeli population that their security depended upon adhering to the hard line, to really sort of throwing off the vestiges of this sort of universalist ethos. And so what we see in the most recent election is that the combination of labor and Meretz, the two parties that are descended from the original labor Zionist idea, got a combined less than 7% of the vote. Meretz fell below the 3.25% threshold, so has no representation now. That was the one party that had some degree of serious concern for the treatment of Palestinians. Even the Labor Party has never really emphasized that as an issue. It has 4 representatives out of 120 in the Knesset. So these are not significant political players anymore. And the alternative to Netanyahu was this bizarre coalition across the political spectrum that was led by Naftali Bennett, himself a leader of the settler movement. On the one hand, this was really dominated by right-wing figures in their own right, people who couldn't get along with Netanyahu for various reasons, but who were just as right-wing, if not more so in some cases, with respect to questions about the territories. The collapse of that government actually led to the discrediting of Bennett's party, which fell beneath the threshold, and so those votes went to parties that aligned themselves back with Netanyahu. So you see very little space in the Israeli political spectrum at this point for real resistance to the kinds of policies that have been undertaken in the territories and with respect to Palestinians generally. You also have the problem that the education system has been dominated for a long time by right-wing elements. That has led to the bizarre situation where you see many parts of the world youth moving to the left. In Israel, actually, youth has been moving to the right. And so this does not augur good things for the future of the Israeli polity.
Mr. Mitchell, I want to conclude our show today with a tough question, and you will answer it.
Excellent. I get to be a lawyer again. Go for it.
The Temple Mount includes Al-Aqsa Mosque and Jewish holy sites. Israeli Minister Ben-Gvir made a provocative tour of the Temple Mount, saying no one has a monopoly over the holy sites. Does he have a point?
Well, look, I think intent matters, right? I think mosques around the world welcome people of other faiths to visit. That's not a problem. But when you have someone who is quite literally a genocidal racist who believes that Palestinian people are not entitled to live on their land, that ancient historic masjid should be destroyed, when he visits, he's visiting it for the purpose of trying to take a step in that direction. And so that's the real problem here. If there was someone visiting that masjid with good intentions, who wanted to express support for the Palestinian people, for their right to freedom, it would be a completely different situation. And just like when Ariel Sharon visited 20 years ago and set off an incredible cycle of violence, the point of these visits is to spark violence. The point is to try to erode Palestinian sovereignty over that land. So no, he doesn't have a point. He is a racist. He is genocidal. He is a dangerous man. He has no business serving in office, and the United States should not be treating him as a legitimate government leader. And I don't care what he has to say. He's a madman.
Mr. Arikat, you have 30 minutes if you would like to answer.
30 seconds. Well, I tell you what, I'm not a religious scholar or anything by any measure, but I would tell you this. These visits are not intended for religious reason. He's not praying. He's going there to assert colonial presence here, to assert the defeat of the Palestinians, here to sort of create a wedge between the Palestinians and their historic heritage sites and so on. So it's not an issue of one going there to pray or where to pray or how to pray, but in fact, what is really intended, much as Edward said.
Professor Roth, you have 20 seconds.
Well, I agree about Itamar Ben-Gvir. I think that what we're seeing really is the unveiling of a really harsh agenda. The problem is that even if those people are ended up being excluded, they're going to be replaced by people who are quote unquote moderate, but who are going to continue to drive the train in the same direction.
Thank you, Professor Brad Roth, Professor of Political Science at Wayne State University. Thank you, Mr. Said Arikat, a long-time Washington-based Palestinian journalist, and Mr. Edward Ahmed Mitchell, the Deputy Director of the Council on American-Islamic Relations, and I will see you again the first Friday next month. Have a good weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. You too, inshallah. Thank you.
Bye-bye.